Just getting started on this System 80B MPU that goes into a Gottlieb Bad Girls. And the primary issue with this MPU board is all this corrosion. The battery used to be right here, and so it's corroded all the way up here. Everything inside the gold circle that I've looped around here is corroded and needs to come off and be replaced. This section, this is the reset section, including this integrated circuit, and that's all going to be replaced by a single modern reset generator. And I'll also replace this cap. Along the way, I'm going to need to replace this daughter card. These things are not easy to get off, and underneath them frequently you'll find fractured solder joints. I got a whole pile of these things here. Here's one of them. And what happens is that the solder joint fractures in a spot that's blind for the user. You can't get at these joints without taking this board off. So I always take this board off and replace it with either one from Great Plains Electronics or from nvram.weebly.com. And it all depends on how bad the traces are at U2, which is underneath here. Now this one's going to be fine because I'm taking this off, but I get a lot of boards in here where somebody has worked on it before. They try to reflow these solder joints, or they try to take the daughter card off and then reflow the joints, and these traces always get all hacked up. So I'm going to do that one myself and put Andrew's card on there. I'm going to take this 5101 off also and put it in a socket just in case the client wants to install NVRAM. I just make it easy for him to do that. And then I'm going to put a loop of wire. I'm pretty sure I am. If you put a loop of wire between the lower part of these two components, it defeats the slam switch, and I'm pretty sure that Bad Girls doesn't require the slam switch to be open, but I'll check that before I do it. It's also where I hang my hang tag. Now the back of this board is pretty good. I did a little sanding on this connector just to see if there's pervasive corrosion underneath there, and there's not. So let's get after it. So I'm back at this Gottlieb System 80B driver board, and I'm depopulating the corroded areas. So you can see these components. I've just lifted one, or I've cut one of the legs, and I'm going to snip the other leg off also using the nice pair of sharp side cutters. Then I'm going to sort of denude this whole area of componentry. And the reason I do it like this is because you can try to desolder these components that are alkaline corroded, where the solder is grayed and you can tell it's been chemically impacted, but you're going to have a really hard time. So I always just cut these things off flush, and then I'll use my side cutters again as a device to, I'll apply heat to the leg of this, at the base, and then just pull that part right out, and the through hole will be fairly clean. Then I'll come back and sand a little and then clean out the rest of the through hole. When corrosion has creeped up to the edge of a chip, it's not enough to sand just to the edge of the chip. You have to take that chip off and see what's underneath there. Here I'm getting ready to remove the original daughter card. You'll see a length of solder between the big spade element and those pins, and the purpose of that is to get more solder on there to more evenly distribute the heat and allow those pins to come out easier. I sand corrosion away with 220 grit sandpaper and then finish it up with 400 grit. An old 12-pin Molex connector makes a nice sanding block. Nice. I use acetone to clean up after I've sanded. On the bench with this CPU from a Gottlieb Bad Girls, it's an 80B, and it had some alkaline corrosion, and I was betting on the come that once I had corrected that alkaline corrosion, which you can see the area, I think I pointed that out before, that it'd be good to go, because a lot of times these things get corroded and then they just go on the shelf and that's it for them. Otherwise they're in good shape. But this one has a problem with this 6532 Riot, apparently, as Ed's vaunted quick scan tester is flagging U4, Z4. F4 means failed 4. And this tester is no longer available, unfortunately, because it is my favorite tester. It will, at power up, it tests each of these 6532s with a sanity check, and it flags any of them that don't pass. Let me say that over. It flags chips that fail the quick test, and then it moves on to subsequent tests. So let me get in there and pull that one out, and we'll see where to go to next. And we are back, and I installed a socket where U4 was, and while I had that 6532 out, I tested it, and to my great surprise, it tested perfectly fine. So the hunt was on to figure out what else could have been wrong. So I fired it up again, and I put my logic probe onto each of the address and data line pins, and I saw that A3 was not pulsing. And then I tested from continuity on A3, which is pin 4 here, to pin 5 of the socket that I installed, and sure enough, there's an open trace between pin 5 here and pin 4 here. So it was a simple matter of adding a jumper to the back. It's kind of frustrating to me that I damaged that trace when I took it out, and even after I inspected that, I missed it. So anyway, here we are again with Ed's Great Plains Electronics tester, again, no longer available, and it's testing each of the Riots, plus one is the 5101. So it'll test 1, 4, 5, 6, and then go back to 1. And it tests the IRQ signal in between each sequence of tests. The clock signal is good, and the reset signal was good. If I power it on, it'll test, let me power it off and then back on. It tests the reset circuit, and that is working fine. The other thing that I did while I had this on the bench was these 4 chips plus this one comprise the switch matrix for the System 80 board, all models of System 80 board, and the playfield switches, strobes, and returns come in here, and these are the same for the cabinet. And then 2 of these 74XX ICs implement the columns, and 2 implement the rows, and then there's a 7432 in here for, I believe, testing these switches or pulsing these switches. It's in the matrix. I don't remember exactly why. So now we know that this board, at least the Riots are good. So it's time to reinstall the game proms and head on over to my RoboWar and check it out. So I have the MPU in my RoboWar with RoboWar ROMs installed, and let's boot it up. Let's see if it boots. Yeah. It should say Robo Warriors. Let me get some glare off of that. There we go. And I have my Pennytech knockoff. Actually, I made this before Pennytech was selling them, based on a design that Jim Paulson, my good friend from Pennsylvania who recently passed, had put together. And the pinout on my design was different from Jim's and different from the eventual Pennytech one. I now have 4 other Pennytech testers, and I had to change the pinout on the Pennytech testers to match my cabling. That's what happens when you're on the bleeding edge. Lamp matrix, or lamp drives, there's no lamp matrix in System 80 land, appears to be working properly, but attract mode is probably the best way to test that. Let's get into tests though. Sorry, I'm gonna skip past all the mundane stuff. Lamp test in System 80 is of little utility, or I'm sorry, 80B is of little utility. Even Bally got this better. So we'll skip that for now. So the CPU board is driving the solenoids and the lamps correctly through my known good driver board. Let me get back into switch matrix test, and I'm going to go across the diagonal. So it should say 0, 0, 11, 22, 33, etc. I'm going to, well, let me do 77. Sometimes 77 on System 80 games does something that you don't want it to do. 020307 Charlie 9. Let's see. 0203 Charlie. Wait a minute. 020307 Charlie 9. So C9, that is correct. The massively boring System 80B display test. I fixed a couple of these displays recently. It boiled down to some of the leads to the glass being broken. Okay, and the other problem is 1DCA. I've seen that many, many times. So this MPU is working perfectly. Of course, the acid test right now is for me to connect the switch matrix back up and play some RoboWar. And I will do that. And then I will put the Bad Girls ROMs back in and ensure that the CPU still boots and drives the game. And I thank you so much for sending it. And finally, with the Bad Girls ROMs back in, we are good to go.